All right, guys. Just want to take a quick second here to do a little overview um, of the Krydex ripoff of the Blue Force Gear 10 speed. So here and here we have the Krydex versions, and then over here is one of the kind of enhanced Blue Force Gear ones, whatever the hell they call it, with the little mounting strip on the front. Anyways, so this is kind of a a little bit of sort of a part two of what I was talking about before with some of this overseas gears and as bad as I thought it was going to be. And these 10-speed ripoffs seem to be another one of those kind of surprising exceptions to the rule. They're the basic 10-speed design. They haven't got either the laser cut, whatever it's called, ultra comp, or what's their shit called? Whatever Blue Force Gear's fancy pants material is. Anyways, it hasn't got that on the front, and it hasn't even got like any like a sewn-on piece of webbing or something with some holes in it, or a you know slot to use for retention bungee. It's just the basic 10-speed type ripoffs, and they don't seem to offer any other variant on the website. All in all, it's actually kind of okay. So it's probably kind of hard to see. This is a 10-speed that's been mounted to a plate carrier a couple times and has had a magazine inserted into it maybe a few times, just for T&E of the slot that I had it put on my plate carrier. And as you can see, it's already got a little bit of the classic Blue Force Gear crinkle of the material, but other than that, you really can't tell that it was ever used at all. This one here, same deal. I put it on the plate carrier, and then stuck a mag in and out of it a couple times just to check the location and everything. And you might not be able to see this, but you can see just the faint little lines here of where it's already kind of taking a set of the magazine being inserted in it. So from that point of view, I can't say there's that big of a difference in the way that this is probably going to wear over time. The one thing I do notice is if you grab this and like stretch it, it does feel a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? A little less, it's both a little bit more stretchy inherently than the 10-speed material is, and yet a little bit less, how do I put it, like flexy, for lack of a better word. It feels like the kind of material where, and like I said, I had the magazine in here for a couple insertions and it's already taking a set. So I think this is going to be the type of material where it's going to, I don't want to say wear out over time, but it is going to be it's less flexible than the Blue Force Gear material is, which means once if you leave a magazine inserted into this for a long period of time, it's probably going to like stretch it out permanently. Or once you use this for a while, having magazines inserted and pulled out of it, it's going to probably stretch it out to a point where it's going to set at that tension a lot sooner than the Blue Force Gear types are. That being said, I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal because, as long as it has enough tension to hold the magazine in, which is the same thing that's true of these Blue Force Gear types, once they start to stretch out, it only stretches out so far because you're only sticking something that's the size of a magazine in. So it's always going to retain some level of retention. It's not going to just become loose and then, oh, your magazine falls out. If you're familiar with Blue Force Gear type 10-speed, you know what I'm talking about. It gets to a point where it's a little stretched out and it kind of takes a set, but it still works fine. I think that's what this is going to do. It's just that this material is going to do it a lot faster, and it's a little less, it doesn't quite snap back the way that the Blue Force Gear stuff does. But other than that, I think it will be okay over time for the simple fact that it's probably going to do the same thing. It's going to get to a point where it's stretched as far as it's going to be for the magazine you're inserting, and then it's going to just hold tension at that size. As far as the back goes, it's standard type tuck tab webbing. as opposed to this awesome helium whisper stuff that, to be fair, really everyone can just use this already. This is by far one of the best mounting systems I've ever seen anybody use. We should just stick with this. But there's nothing wrong with good old classic webbing tuck tabs. They actually do have a piece of HDPE or whatever type of plastic they use in here, so it is actually a properly stiff tab. It's not just a folded over piece of webbing. That's great because that extra stiffness there does help these to lock in place better than just some companies that just fold over the webbing. Or so I've found over using a lot of these type of pouches over the years, is the ones with the actual plastic in them are a little bit better at staying put than just regular webbing. The only downside to it is that does make this tab a little bit thicker. And in the case of something like this, so once you've got it mounted onto, oh god, a magazine, don't tell YouTube. When you've got it mounted onto something, especially if you're going to do like this and mount it to the front of something where it's on top of another magazine or on top of some other harder surface, what that can lead to is that tab, in fact, you can kind of feel it. You can kind of run your finger over it here and feel it in there. And what that leads to sometimes is when you stick the magazine in to this, it does kind of hit on it as you're inserting it. It won't do it right away, but I have noticed that over several insertions over time of sticking it in and out of the pouch, that this can start to push on that tab, and will start to push the tab out the bottom of the pouch. So you do need to ever so often check your pouch and make sure that tab is stuck in there all the way. The other fix you can do, if you're pretty sure that the place you're going, oh god, they're seeing the magazine again. No, not the high capacity magazines. Anyways, weep and gnash your teeth, YouTube. I don't care. What you can do is take a little bit of sort of the generic clear average use super glue in like the little containers and put just like a droplet or two on here and then stick it in there, let it dry, and it actually does a reasonably good job of holding it in place. But it's not a permanent solution. You can eventually yank it out because that type of super glue doesn't really bond these two things together, so it doesn't like webbing and this type of like cordura and stuff. It doesn't really bond to that well. Or so I've noticed from previous misadventures in trying to like adhere Velcro to the inside of a pouch that I wanted Velcro in, and it just would not stick no matter what kind of glue I used. But anyway, that's a story for another time. So you can, if you're finding that these tuck tabs are being pushed out the bottom of the pouch a lot, putting a little bit of a tiny droplet of super glue or something else in here will help to keep them in place a little bit more permanently, but it won't. You will be able to get them off eventually. You might have to pull at it a little bit if it doesn't kind of flex and break loose over time by itself. You may have to if you want to take it off, do a little bit of tugging with some pliers. But I would assume that the end user is smart enough to say that they're probably going to be leaving it in place on whatever platform is on for a while if you're going to actually do an extreme solution like that. But anyways, other than that, that's not that big of a deal. As far as the sewing on these goes, and I'll refer to the sewing on these as both of these because they're pretty much exactly the same. As I've talked about with like the plate carrier and stuff, it's sort of 50-50. So you can see on the edges here where the webbing is sewn on, it's very nicely, I want to say, triple stitched or better on the webbing. So, and it's nice and tight. I don't see, it's not loose. It's again, well done. And then you have this doubled over piece of cordura that forms the backing, which is then got the straps sandwiched in between it. And then that's single stitched, which I find annoying if you're going to have some place where the straps you're depending on to hold this thing on your kid is only single stitched on is pretty lame. I mean, again, my endless gripe with these companies is like, you did it here, why not here? Like, it only cost you another couple seconds to run, an extra stitch around the edge so you can have it double stitched at least. Really? Like, why? Anyways, so this panel that's, the backer for it is single stitched, which means that these straps are single stitched in. Now, this is me giving it a pretty good tug. I mean, you'd have to really, you can see that it is starting to flex a little bit, but I guess maybe I got lucky with this or whatever. I've seen some other areas and other gear I have from them and stuff where it's kind of loose and the stitches open up, but it's actually pretty tight on this one. So maybe I just got a good one, or maybe the quality fluctuates overall over these. I guess I wouldn't be surprised at that. But if you get a good one, it'll hold. And for what you're using this for, considering the direction of force on this pouch when you're putting stuff into it, if you don't have a sewing machine to fix this yourself, it's probably okay if you get a good one. If you get one that's all, loosey-goosey up here, yeah, it's probably going to be a problem. But if you go in that's actually sewn pretty decently, like this one, it'll hold. Especially, like I said, the direction of travel for force on these is not on the straps. The amount of force you're putting on these is what I'm saying, is it's not going to, be a problem with, something where maybe I would be maybe a little bit more concerned if it was something you're going to put something heavy in, or you're going to constantly be, doing something like one of my pet peeves is zippers being single stitched in, because you're constantly fucking with the zippers. That always messes with the stitching eventually, but it'll probably hold. But I'm going to take a sewing machine to this anyway, just because I'm obsessed with people single stitching stuff and I really hate it. Anyways, that's sewn together. This is sewn onto the backer, and then the piece of elastic on the front is closed and seam taped at the bottom, and then also, as far as I can tell, it looks to be, I want to say single stitched at the top. It's hard to say, because on this side over here, it's very obvious single stitched, and here's part of where my gripe comes in is with when you're loading the magazine, you're putting a lot of force at the top of these lips, at the top of this elastic. So you're always putting pressure here. And as you can see here, well, maybe you can't. Let me see if you can see that. Yeah, if you can't see that, you can see where the stitching comes over the top here, and you can see that's only a single piece of stitching. So as I'm putting force on this lip, you can immediately see it. Maybe you can't from that angle, but you can immediately see it starting to pull that piece of stitching out and start to separate it from the backer here. Which means that, number one, like I said, the stitching on here is, well, maybe not entirely tight enough to be to military specs, and also it's not double stitched, which means a single line of stitching here at a high stress area is always going to be weaker than a double stitch or a triple stitch or a bar tack, or something like that. That is going to give some more strength to a high stress area, which means that at some point in the future, you're going to pull this, the top of this is going to pull off the backer. And then over here, I want to say on this side over here is probably, I'm seeing what looks to be a double stitch at the top and a double stitch at the bottom, but not in the middle, so I can't prove this. You can kind of see the same thing at the back. I see what looks like a double stitching here and double stitching here. So what I think they did on this side is it single stitched the middle and tacked the top and tacked the bottom, which means it's where they ended their stitch line with this, which again, for the level of, sort of sewing on this stuff is not what I'd have done. Anchoring your stitch at the highest stress area of this pouch is just not a great idea. So I highly expect that over time, this is going to pull away from the top of the pouch pretty quickly. Now, let's just say I'm just bashing away at these guys. If you look at Blue Force gears, yeah, it's kind of, it's double stitched. Yes, it is. See, you can see here, 2 lines of stitching here, and it flows into this, and it's double stitched to the top, and then it's double stitched on this side too. Notice how much tighter this stitching is than that. So at least they've got double stitch at the top, and if I'm going to pull at this, again, you may or may not be able to see it, but over here where it's attached to the Hypalon or Ultra Comp or whatever the hell this stuff is, backer here, even though it's hard to see on the camera here, but if you're familiar with these pouches, you know that there's always a little hole punched here, like a little laser could dink through it. Even with the hole punched through there and a piece of stitching running through that hole and everything, even with that, with me pulling on this at its maximum extension, it's not, the threading there is not pulling away from the material or the backer where I can see a gap starting to form in the thread. So even though the stitching is not that far off between the two, it's pretty, you know, again, it's one of those things where once you actually look at these things side by side, it doesn't look like that much difference on the internet, or if you've never seen, you know, serious gear versus, you know, the overseas stuff before, it's hard for people to understand this until you've seen it. It seems like such a subtle difference, and like, what does it really matter? Well, it does kind of matter, you know, because this is doing a proper job of being stitched well at the highest stress area versus this, which I am fairly sure is going to start to pull apart pretty rapidly, especially over on this side where it's only single stitched. Now, to put that in perspective further, we're also talking about, you know, what's this, like a $35 pouch, and this is a $15 pouch. So something to think about as the end user is, depending on what you're going to do with this, is it really worth me spending the $35 on this, even though it's going to last a little bit longer, instead of just buying, you know, 2 of these, and when I wear one out, I throw another one on the kit, and I move on with my life, you know? Like, it's hard to say. But at a 2-to-1 price point, it's definitely something to consider. Where it might more importantly be a factor in price is when you get into the bigger pouches, like this double pouch or the triple pouches. If you were going to use one of those, now you're talking, you know, pouches that for this are $50 or more. Versus, you know, I think this was, I want to say 18 or 20, somewhere in there. Not so, you know, it's easy to say, you know, it's not that big of a deal if I'm just going to buy one pouch here, or, you know, a pouch or two there, and sure, I'll opt for, you know, the better out-of-the-box solution. But once you get into, you know, if you need something that's a little bit more specialized of a pouch, like a double pouch, triple pouch, etc., it starts to get pretty hard to swallow the price of these these Blue Force gear pouches. From that perspective, I can only look at these as something that, you know, in the current year where everything is just getting more and more expensive, the inflation is going up, and the gear is getting ridiculously priced. It's something that I have to look at, you know, as an item that a lot of people still use and still like, and say, is it something that's a viable alternate to the proper equipment? And off the top of my head, for this quick overview, yeah, I think it kind of is. To talk about this one real quick, the stitching and other issues and stuff are about the same. The centerpiece here is, let me double check this so I'm being correct. Cue elevator music. Wait, that's not elevator music, that's Jeopardy. Yes. Okay. Now I've gotten that off. To confirm that it is a very similar kind of thing as what they did with the side here, where they started the stitch here, ended the stitch here, and a single stitch in the middle. So it's okay. Again, personally, I would have probably done this a little bit differently, but that's the way they did it, and I can't complain. But let me see if I can show this a little bit. You can already see in some places, oh boy, you're not going to be able to see this on camera, like the middle here and the end over here, it is very much doing the same thing where that stitching is loose enough where once the once the pouch starts to flex, that stitching immediately starts to pull away from the backer. So I would say, it's very much the same type of outlook that I gave when I was talking about the plate carrier itself and some of the other stuff. Is this going to be something you're going to serious, should you deploy with this gear? Maybe not. Is this something that you should expect to get like a lot of use out of for a long time? Maybe not. But is it something that's good enough for like, I'm poor as hell and I have $60 to spend on a chest rig or something. I just need something to carry my magazines to go to the range, or I'm, a firearms instructor, and sometimes I have people show up with no gear, and I want to have gear on hand so that they can just like borrow it or rent it and don't have to invest a lot of money, stuff like that. Or, you're a new buyer and you're like, I think I want to try some of these pouches. I think I want to try this setup, but I don't want to spend, 50, 60, $80 on, one pouch. Great alternatives for that. I very much feel, and I'm at some point I'm going to try this if I ever get time to do it. I very much feel that with the addition of touching up the sewing in these key areas, that you can make most of those durability concerns go away. And then, of course, at that point, the only things you'll have is the minor drawbacks of a slightly less elastic and tabs that sometimes get shoved out the bottom, which, in my opinion, are kind of whoop-de-hoo, like, for half the price of this, I can put up with, elastic that isn't perfect, like, that's not kind of a non-issue for me. So, right now, quick overview, off the top of my head, of these things. They're okay, for now. I very much feel, again, like I said before on the last video, well, I almost knocked my camera over, I'm a pro at this YouTube thing, guys. Alright, like I said back in the previous review about the Krydex plate carrier, it's a little amusing and a little infuriating how close this is to being okay. And the minimal level of basic effort that would have to be put in to bring these things up to an acceptable level of sewing standards, where it's something that people could buy for considerably less than the name brand thing and could count on it to last a considerable amount of time and be acceptably durable. That is really annoying that they couldn't take a little bit more time and effort to get the stitching straight and reinforce the key areas that need to be reinforced and so forth. The other thing that I said too in the other video is my previous point of, if you're going to just straight up rip off people's designs, you're allowed to make improvements. And the thing that I would very much love to see added to this, because obviously Krydex is, at my ear, just waiting on my command, I would have added a simple webbing, just a piece of doubled over webbing sewn on here, a little box stitch here, so that you have a little tab that you can pass a piece of bungee through, and then you could pass the bungee through here, and then run it over to the platform you have on in the back, and then you could have basic bungee retention like this on here, which, again, would make a lot of sense for this kind of pouch, not only because I know already some people like to have that option for extra bungee retention on open top elastic pouches like this, because they do have a little bit of a rep for, once they start to wear in, your pouches, your magazines can go whee, off the top of the thing and disappear into God knows where. So having that option would be great, and then even more so for these pouches with the less amazing elastic retention is going to be helpful to, again, give them a little bit more longevity. So once they do start to wear in and get to the point where they don't really have the brand new level of retention that they have now, you can then do something about, keeping your magazines in there without then having to immediately go out and buy a whole new pouch. If your sewing was good and it had a retention option, I'd say these would be, especially at the price point they're already at, these would be very much a viable alternative to the ridiculously expensive name brand pouches. So anyways, that's my quick overview off the top of the head thoughts on these pouches, and I think I'm going to definitely try to enhance these at some point in the future. As always, I hope you guys got something out of this video, and stay tuned. Thanks for watching.